Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Allistair, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this. Hey guys, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast, or welcome back to the podcast. I'm Allistair, your host. In this week of What It Takes, I have a special guest, a very special guest. It's Bob Bowman, the longtime coach of the most decorated athlete in Olympic history, Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps finished with 23 gold medals, his last Olympics being in Rio in 2016. Bob was also the assistant coach in 3 different Summer Olympics. He was also the head of the men's swimming team at the 2016 Rio Olympics, and he was inducted into the International Swimming Hall of Fame in 2016. Bob is currently the head swim coach at Arizona State University. Guys, I know you're going to enjoy this one. I just love listening to Bob's philosophy, sense of humor. Also, he came across as such a humble man for someone that's achieved so much. But I know you're going to enjoy this one regardless if you're an athlete, player, coach, parent. Bob's insights are incredibly interesting, and from a man who's achieved so much in his career, I was honored to have him on the podcast. So here he is, Bob Bowman. Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Allistair. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I know you're a busy guy, so I'm not going to take too much of your time. First off, I read your book last year, The Golden Rules, which was featured in my top 10 books of 2018. So congratulations on a super book.
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
So I'm going to get straight into it, or I'm going to dive straight into it, excuse the pun, with the 10 golden rules that are in your book called the Golden Rules. First one, have a vision. You need a vision of where you want to go, what you want to do, and who you want to be someday down the road. Think creatively about what it is you want out of life and where it is you want to go. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, Bob?
Exactly. I think all of us need some direction, right? And when we talk about the vision, that's, for me, that's something that's going to get you through the hard times, right? Because no one's ever just going to set up a plan to go to some level and just follow it 1, 2, 3, 4 and have everything perfectly work out. There are going to be challenges, there are going to be setbacks, you're going to get off track a little bit. But your vision, and for me, that's I would call that a dream goal, right? It's what's your dream? And for a swimmer, Michael Phelps, it might be to be the best ever. For a typical American age group swimmer, it might be to swim in the Olympics or swim in college. There's something out in the future that is kind of drawing you into your next step that kind of gets you out of bed in the morning, right? You can have a detailed plan, but I don't think anybody's going to want to go jump in a cold pool at 5 a.m. because they want to finish their 200-meter free in 55 seconds. Although that would be a really good thing to do.
Yeah.
But to be the best ever, that might get you going when you didn't really feel like maybe being motivated that day.
Yeah. Bob, you have, for example, a 12 or 13-year-old in front of you. How would you relay that message to a 12, 13-year-old about having a vision? Would they quite understand that?
I think that's when I get back to saying a dream goal, right? What's your dream? What's your dream about this sport? What excites you about it? Because your vision is really more emotional. Your plan, right, which comes after the vision, is a lot more objective. So I think what you're trying to get them to do is just use their imagination and just think about where in the future, what do you think what would excite you the most? And it's different for different people, right? It's like, what's my goal? My goal is to run the best swimming program, coach the best swimming program in the world, whatever that means. I have some objective criteria for that. But, that gets me out of bed every day to go work with these athletes and help them go as far as they can go. I'll give you an example. Michael Phelps, when he was 11, we were starting to go through this goal setting process. And I had him write on a sheet of paper. I gave him a little assignment to do. And at the top of the page, they had to write what was their dream goal, which is kind of their vision, right? Their long-term vision. And he said, I want to swim in the Olympics. Okay, pretty good, right? Just not too specific, but out there, and you knew he was thinking about it. And he came from a club where that was possible. I mean, he had a lot of things that would make him think that was doable. And then we said, okay, below that, let's write 3 of your short-term goals for this next season, right, for 6 months. We just kind of moved it back a little bit. And he had very specific goals, like a time in each event. And then we said, okay, let's take each of those and write 3 specific things that if you do them in practice, you are guaranteed to reach those goals. And then so he would break it down even further. The interesting thing about the vision on this part was when you turn the page over, he had started to write, my dream goal is to win gold medals but he thought that was too much. So he crossed that out and just said, I want to swim in the Olympics on the other side of the page. So even at a young age, that seed was there. And that was something that was sort of motivating him, even though it was very, very far off, right? I think your vision can be, it can be, I don't want to say vague, but it's not specific, right? Your goals on a daily basis are incredibly specific. Your vision is something that just kind of pulls you into the future, and it can be very broad.
Yeah, perfectly well said. Moving on, number 2, Bob, be all in. The right attitude matters. The right attitude, the all-in attitude can turn long shots into legends. Use positive energy to go after your dreams. And there's one quote that I loved from the book, and it was, we were not chasing medals, we were chasing excellence.
Yeah, exactly. I think in my program, the highest crime you can commit is not bring the right attitude to your training.
Love that. Love that.
That's it. Other than that, we forgive just about everything. But, when you come in, you've got to be there to see what you can get out of yourself that day in that situation, in that moment. And that's the essence, really, of competition, right? It's being present, and it's bringing your very best to that moment. And I think when you have a positive outlook on things, you can get through the harder times, which there will be, and you can face the challenges and learn so much more about yourself because you're going to give that extra bit of effort. I think when you're negative about it, you don't ever fully invest. So positive people are fully invested in what they're doing in the process of success. And that's just something we would insist on. Like, we wouldn't allow complaining in practice. That's just not allowed. Just don't do it. Or go underwater and do it. That's what I would say. You can complain all you want underwater. On the top, keep your mouth shut. Or say something positive. Encourage the people beside you. And I think if you're doing that, you just create an environment where success is inevitable. And that's a big part of my job. My job is to create the environment. The athletes do the work and make the performances happen and make the changes. But my job is to create an environment when they walk in that pool where if they buy into what we're asking them to do, they'll be successful.
That's a great point, Bob, because here's the thing, I obviously consult with teams and colleges and so on and so forth in different sports. And one of the questions, I would get from a coach is, how do you get players to buy in? How do you, confront those athletes who are maybe not as committed as others? Is it possible, or is it a personal thing? It's more the athlete's hunger and desire. How do you get athletes to buy in?
Well, it's 2 different things. Number one, you have to make sure you have the right people, because every place is not the right place for everything, right? And I think that after the 30 years I've been doing this and the kind of reputation that we have and the things that we've done, when people walk in my door, they're expecting a certain thing. So that's part of it, right? You know what I mean? You kind of have to know what you do and what you don't do well. And there's some things I don't do very well. So, the athletes that come into my program know they're going to work at a certain level, that they're going to be pushed at a certain level, and the reasons why that's going to happen. So I think it's important that you sort of define what your niche is in the sport or wherever you're going to be. So once that's clear on the front end, then I think you can help them make decisions about whether that's a good fit for them. And if it is, then it's so much easier to buy into what you're doing, right?
Absolutely.
People come to me because they want to win a gold medal. Well, that's fine and very exciting. But what we talk about in the first meeting is it takes what it takes. And that's what we're going to give you. And if you don't want to do that, then you're not going to do what it takes. Or at least the way we see it. So I think being very clear up, and upfront in the beginning of the process helps get your buy-in, right?
Absolutely.
And also that there's going to be a sort of natural process of some people come in and maybe it doesn't work and maybe something else works for them. And I'm happy to help people do that. I don't feel like I have the only way. Certainly not. I have a way. But I think just finding people who really buy into your system and on the front end, educating them about it is important.
Absolutely. All right, number 3, and I love this one. Be a risk taker. Get out of your comfort zone and push yourself. When you don't take risks and challenge yourself, you stagnate and get complacent. Turn risk taking into a habit so you propel yourself forward to achieve your dreams.
I like it.
So do I.
But I would say that it's take an educated risk, right? You're not just going out there and doing crazy things, but you're trying to go past the limit of what you think your capabilities are. Maybe not 10 miles past, maybe it's one step. But if you don't operate on the edge of your capabilities, certainly in training, and I also think in competition, you're never going to know what your full potential is. So there are times when you want to come in and go for something in practice that you thought would have been impossible to do. And then you see it's not impossible to do. And then maybe the next time you could come back and do that better. But I do believe that no one really grows out inside their comfort zone, right? You're going to have to be somewhere where you're uncomfortable and you're kind of pressing the limits of what you think you could do either emotionally or physically or psychologically. Maybe all three, who knows? But I think that's a big part of the equation.
Yeah, I agree. Excellent. Number 4, have a game plan. And I love this one because in my book, Champion Minded, I talk about the importance of having a game plan, having structure to your day, knowing what you're doing from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed. That's a champion-minded approach. But in this one, you said, build yourself a foundation to achieve your vision. So again, it's linked to that vision that you spoke about in your first point. And you do this by creating a game plan.
Yeah. Well, the game plan takes many forms, but if you wanted to think about it in its simplest form, you have a destination, right? Your long-term destination is down the road. And there are many points in between where you can kind of check and see if you're moving in the right direction. So those kind of help to start frame your plan, right? And then you start adding a time to that. So, if in 4 years I would like to be at some point, well, then halfway there, I'd like to be around this point. And then you start figuring out what's going to happen between today and 2 years from now. And you gradually just start working yourself backwards, right? So you start out 2 years and then you go back to 1 year and then maybe you're 6 months. And then you keep working back till you get to the most important thing. And that is, what am I going to do right now?
Yep.
But it all fits together. And that's what the planning process is. It just directs your activity, right? So I like for kids, and in swimming, it's just an ideal setup for us because we have times and they're super objective, right? One of the best quotes I ever read was, the best thing about swimming is, 103 is a 103 and no amount of bullshit is going to make it a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
The clock says what the clock says.
Clock doesn't lie.
How we feel about it.
Yep.
That's just what it is.
Yep.
So we can break our performances down into time increments, and we can put it into how many strokes we want to take that time and what stroke rate we want to do to achieve that time. So there are any number of very objective scientific things that we can then put into this plan, which will make our time very effective, hopefully effectively spent. And we can put that into a plan so that as we move through a season or we move through a quadrennium, we're constantly building towards what our long-term vision is. So I think that's what is important about planning. It just gives you direction. I would tell little kids, I'd say, not having a plan is just like getting in your car and, well, number one, there's a destination, but you don't know how to get there. So you just get in and start driving, hoping that you'll end up there.
Yep.
Might be fun, but
good analogy.
Might not be that efficient.
It's funny you should say
that's
that.
Where your plan is.
It's funny you should say that, Bob, because that is one quote I remember way back in the school days, and a teacher was giving an analogy of, look outside there, those cars driving past. If you were to stop one of those cars and said, hey, where are you going? And the guy or the woman said, I have no idea. That's pretty much like having no destination and no vision. And it's stuck with me now 25 years later.
Incredibly true, right?
Yeah,
so
right?
Simple, but so true.
Yeah, exactly. Number 5, live the vision daily. And I love how it keeps getting back to the vision, the dream, the destination.
Exactly.
Success becomes routine when you have a routine. Create daily habits that push you towards your life vision and mission.
Yeah. I think all of us are better, and certainly if you're trying to pursue something like an Olympic medal or any high-level goal, it doesn't matter what it is. Repetition and having a kind of sense of rhythm in your day and how you're including the things that must be included is just critical, because otherwise you just leave things out. So I think the more structured you can be in your time and how you manage that, the more efficient you can be, and actually the less stressed you will be. I think the most stressed people I know are people who are disorganized, right?
Yes, 100%.
So the more organized you are in your plan and how you go about your day, the more solid you feel, the less stress you feel, and the more energy you can put into doing the things that matter, right? Instead of deciding what I'm going to do next, you already know. So I think a routine is critical.
I've always said, Bob, a messy space is a messy mind. So, simple things like making your bed in the morning provide you with obviously a clean environment. A messy office table also disturbs my thinking and my clarity. So you're 100% on the money there. Number 6, have a team. How critical is it to have the right people around you?
Oh, it's very important. In swimming, obviously, coaches play a big role in swimming, because the athlete in the water really has no feel for what they look like when they're in the water with their eyes, right? So there's a big difference between what you kinesthetically feel and what might actually be happening. And I guess that's true in every sport, actually. So you start to build this team of people who can help you reach your goals, because nobody basically does anything by themselves. I don't care what they say. It's everything we do is collaborative on some level, right? So, in swimming, you would have the athlete at the center of this circle, and then you would have a coach. You would, in some cases, you might have a strength coach. You would have probably a doctor, some kind of medical professional, maybe a trainer or physiotherapist. If you're Michael Phelps, you're going to have accountants and lawyers and publicists and this and that, a whole army of people, right?
Yeah.
So it's
the size of an NFL football team.
It's pretty funny. I thought one time we were talking, and I was sitting with Michael's mom, Debbie. I said, "Wow, when this started, it was just the 3 of us. Now it's 100 people. Right? Everywhere we go, there's an army of things happening." But
the simple became complex.
Exactly. So that was my job, to try to keep everything as simple as possible. Ask the simple questions. What is our main objective? Swim faster. If you do that, everything else falls into place. If you don't, we have problems. So I think that when you're building your team, what you want, and a lot of this goes into what you need as a person, but everybody needs some form of external accountability, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people who are unbelievably motivated but everybody needs at times an unvarnished opinion from somebody about what's happening. I'll give you a perfect example. Okay. This is a stupid example, but it happened today.
Bring it.
So I have this lemon tree in my backyard here in the desert, and every lemon became ripe this week. So I have 30 lemons. Okay. And I decided yesterday I was going to bake lemon bread, and I did. I did 3 or 4 different ones, and I took it into the staff this morning, and I gave each of them a piece, and they ate it, and they all said, "Oh, it's good, it's good, it's good." And I said, "No, I don't want you to say it's good because your boss came in and gave you a piece of bread and said, eat it. Tell me what you think." And they're like, "Well, it has a great lemony flavor, but it's really dry. I think it's overbaked." You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, I think you want to surround yourself with people who aren't afraid to speak up and tell you what's going on. So next time I'll be better. I already know 3 things to do better than I did yesterday about this particular project. But I think that's why you want a team of people around you who are going to have probably a different view. Nobody's going to believe exactly the same way on everything. And I don't want to be surrounded by people who believe exactly like me. I want them to kind of believe in our big concepts, but I want to be challenged on things.
Yeah.
And I think everybody needs that. So that's a big, important part of people, having people that you trust, but who will challenge you.
Yeah.
And support you, right? Because you're going to need support. Nobody's going to do it alone. And there are going to be tough times where you're going to need any number of people to sort of stand with you, stand behind you, and help you get through those.
Mm-hmm. And it's so tough sometimes, to get that feedback, and it's maybe not the feedback you expect or the feedback that you wanted, but it is the feedback that's going to ultimately improve you. I mean, one of my favorite quotes is from Jim Rohn, and it was, "You become the 5 people you surround yourself with." And I love that quote because, especially speaking to younger generation, to college kids, always ask them, think about those 5 people you have around you. Are they telling you what you need to hear? Are they challenging you? Are they pushing you? Are they people that are going to be there for you on the dark days?
Exactly. I could not agree more. I use that myself.
Yeah.
You're the average of the 5 people you hang out most with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Excellent. Number 7, stay motivated over time. Now, this is a big one because motivation can just go with the ebbs and flows. But for you to stick to the things in the long run, you'll need passion. You'll need motivation to keep going day after day, since you might lose sometimes. To stay passionate and motivated, you have to fake your interest until the sparks reignite the fire in you. This is an interesting one because, seasons can be long. That vision can be 2 years away, 3 years away. How do you stay motivated over the long run, Bob?
Well, I think whenever I have personally or worked with people who have become unmotivated, usually 2 things are occurring. Either they don't have goals which are reasonable or exciting, right? Their goals are either too easy or too hard, or they've lost track of their goals that they had, which were appropriately set. You just kind of lose track of what we're trying to do. You get caught up into some day-to-day or your immediate situation, and you sort of lose track. And that's why I think this game plan is so important, because that's what you go back to. Well, our game plan is we wanted to be here. And remember that was important to you because your vision was this. Okay, yeah, I remember that. And that doesn't mean you're just going to automatically snap back on it, but you can start getting back in the right direction, right? I just think some people get off track and they just start going off to the right or left and not forward. And just being able to say, okay, let's take a second. Let's look at what our plan was. Was it a good plan? Was it something you want to change? And if so, how will we change it? But I think staying true to your game plan helps you stay much more motivated because you feel like you're working towards something that you can see. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have a roadblock and you might have to just kind of keep working through some difficulties. But for me, your long-term vision, right, your dream goal, let's get back to that for a second. That's about motivation. And then your specific goals that are coming up in the next 6 months, the next 3 months. This is what we're trying to do. That's why we're working on this. Let's find a way to get it done. I think that gets people more motivated. I think when they lose track of their goals, or maybe their goals aren't set correctly, that's when people tend to really be unmotivated.
I agree. Something I used to do as a kid, Bob, was I used to write my goals down on pieces of paper and stick them above my bed and stick them in the
Yeah.
in the bathroom. And I stopped doing that for a while. And funny enough, probably about 3 or 4 years later, I started to do that again. I started to do what I did as a kid, is write in a piece of paper what my goals were and post them around the house. Now, obviously, when I'd had visitors, they'd think I was absolutely crazy, but we lose track of those simple cues. I mean, it's like creating a habit, right? Is that when you're reminded
Yeah,
of it, it keeps you motivated.
exactly. And I will give you a very interesting case of that. When Michael was a little bit older, I believe he was 13, turning 14. We sat down and did one of these goal setting exercises before a season, and I had him pick 3 events, and I had him pick the goal time that he wanted in those events, and then 3 things under each event, which if he did them in practice, would be guaranteed to do those times. And I had him put it on his refrigerator, right? Because at the time he was eating nonstop, so he'd see it 100 times a day, opening the refrigerator.
I've heard about his eating schedule.
Yes, exactly. But anyway, we swam at the end of the summer, and he did quite well. And I was like, those are very close to those times. And I had let him keep the paper. I didn't even keep a copy. I knew in my mind kind of what he's trying to do. And I said, bring that paper in. And he brought it in. And so his goal time in the 200 fly was 2:04.68, and he swam 2:04.68.
Wow.
His goal time in the 400 IM was 4:31.86. I think he went 4:31.88, so 2/100ths. And then in his mile, it was 16 minutes .00, and he went 16 minutes .80, I think. So 0.8 of a second over 16 minutes, right?
Wow.
This was when he was 14. But I started thinking, wow, that's incredible that you could focus on something and be so specific. But his objectives in practice were very specific, and we had tied them to those times, and he did all of them. And he just got better and better at it as he would go. But he would always have his goals in a place where he could see them, either on his night table, in his locker at the pool, on the refrigerator. 1 year before the Olympics in Beijing, exactly a year, he handed me a sheet of paper with his goals on it. And he said, I want to swim 47.51 and 100 free. He led off our relay a year later, 47.51.
Wow. That's
incredible. I mean, the hair stands up on my neck when I think about stuff like that, right?
Absolutely.
But
I mean,
it's powerful. It's powerful.
Let me ask you this: Did Michael use visualization as a technique? Did he actually visualize
time.
those times?
Michael is the best visualizer of all time. I promise you. And we started working on that when he was about 12. And usually about 6 weeks before a major competition, I'd start reminding him, and he would really start visualizing on a daily basis. But Michael, I actually found out after Beijing, I didn't even know this. Michael would visualize the race exactly the way he wanted it to go, right? Which is what we teach him to do, right? Run a movie in your head of, and as vivid as you can be, right? Smell it, see it, be there, put yourself in it. And he would visualize himself as if he was in the water, and then he would visualize it as if he was in the stands watching himself. But then he would start to visualize scenarios where things did not go the way he had planned and how he would react to that.
I love this.
I didn't know that at the time. So he would have this whole database of scenarios so that when the moment came, he would automatically just draw on one, right? If it went according to plan, he'd already had that planned. If something didn't go according to plan, he had a backup. So, but he's very much into visualization and very, very good at it. So,
Bob, that's an incredibly interesting topic, because I had Paul Price on, who was top 3 in the world in squash. And I'd listened to one of his presentations in Brisbane, Australia at the World Squash Conference about visualization. And I mentioned to him, I obviously read in your book that Michael would visualize what if things didn't go well. And I asked him if he did that, and he said never, but that was a very, very interesting concept. And he probably wish he had, because the moment you actually need visualization is when things don't go well. I mean,
exactly.
It's perfect to have. It's nice to have this perfect image of winning a race or winning a championship or a match or whatever it may be. But what if things don't go right? I mean, I even remember reading about the fact that his goggles filled up with water and he had to swim
Yeah.
the last 50 meters or whatever it was blind or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that's incredible. And I think even if I read one story correct, Bob, that you stood on his goggles. What, is that correct?
I did. It wasn't because I thought his goggles would fill up in the Olympic final ever, but quite frankly, one time I think it was 2003, we were in Australia. I remember in Melbourne at a World Cup, and it was the morning, and my team had all their stuff on the floor, just kind of strewn about in this area. It annoyed me because it wasn't very organized.
Uh-huh.
Michael's goggles were on the ground, and I just stepped on them. So then he swam the prelim of his race, and he did fine. He came back. He's like, I don't know, my goggles filled up with water. I guess I was okay. I was like, yeah, well, you did a nice job. Way to overcome adversity. Maybe next time keep them in your bag.
Oh, amazing.
So that was kind of part of it. But I always felt like my job was to try to challenge him in little ways like that, so that he would be able to respond. And he got very good at responding to adversity.
Excellent. Now I must apologize. I've lost track here because number 8 is use adversity as an advantage.
Well, there you go.
I mean, that's exactly exactly. That's what we're leading on to. And you said here, practice being in uncomfortable situations. Use tests, pressure, and rehearsals to practice putting yourself in uncertain and uncomfortable scenarios. Take something from failure and use it to move your vision along.
Yep. The key to success at an Olympic Games is to get a normal and predictable performance in a very abnormal and unpredictable environment. Everybody who makes the Olympics can swim their event, right? They're trained.
Yep.
And they probably have a pretty good plan to get there. But the people who do well are the people who handle these unpredictable and kind of adverse situations that pop up and don't let that knock them off their game. So you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And we try to do that in training any number of ways. And, quite frankly, a big stressor in practice on these kids is me. A lot of times my job is to provide a environment that is adverse in practice so they can overcome some things, to give them hard training sets, to put demands on them in training. It's very different saying, okay, we're going to swim 10 100s, give me your best effort, and let's see what your times are. Or if I come in and say, we're going 10 100s, but you have to have all 10 under 57, and we're not leaving until you do. I don't care if you do 100 of them. That's a different thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's putting them in a situation where, wow, this got really hard, or there's a lot of other things going on except for me getting in and saying I gave my best effort. So that's kind of what the Olympics are like. You just have to do it when the time comes, whether you're ready or not. So we try to put them in some situations where they face that level of stress. And I'll give you a perfect example. I have a young lady training with me now, Sierra Runge. She swam with me since she was 14. She was on our gold medal 800 relay in Rio. She's swimming on my college team now, but I remember one of her big breakthroughs was in the summer. We did a set that we always do of 100 meters, and it was one easy, one fast. Not that it's that important, but she was swimming. There were 10, I think, start out, there were 10 of them. And you do one every 4 minutes, a hard one every 4 minutes. And she was swimming kind of 101, 102, 101, 102. And I said, Sierra, we're not going to stop this set until you do one under a minute. And she's like, okay. I mean, she was kind of fine with it. But she got through 10 and she hadn't broken a minute. So we just kept going, 11, 12, 13. And she was getting close. She'd go a minute 0.1 and I wouldn't give it to her, right? I would say, sorry, got to do it again. On number 24,
wow.
After not making it, right? Number 24, she goes 58.3.
Wow.
And it was kind of like, and she was, before this, she'd kind of gone into the crying phase and, I can't do it. And I was like, no, you can do it. Keep doing another one. Do another one. And But on number 24, for some reason, she just focuses in. She goes 58.3, and then she's like, wow, I didn't think I could do that. I'm like, yeah, now you know, right? Now you know you can reach down and do it. And I think that really is something that you carry with you. And obviously, as a coach, you have to use some good judgment and when you're going to go for something like that. It's not every day. It's probably not every month, right? But every now and then you want to put them in a situation where you see what they can really do and put them through some adversity and see what happens. But when they go through it and really, do something positive, I think it just gives them confidence that they can't get anywhere else.
And that's obviously where great coaching comes in as well, Bob. But I mean, those are the moments that really create the resilience and grit, aren't they? And I find so often so many athletes miss that opportunity or miss that chance because building grit and resilience comes in times of fatigue and frustration. And like you said there, she'd gone through the crying phase, but then broke through that. And how many athletes, give up just before that breakthrough?
Very true. Yeah.
Excellent. Number 9, perform with confidence. I mean, obviously confidence is key in sports and in life, but stay focused on the task at hand and only take on what's in front of you, not what's in the future. And obviously one word that comes to mind there is process.
Yep. Well, if someone asked me my coaching philosophy, it would be that the process is more important than the outcome, right? By far. And that's where we should spend our time. We should spend our focus. It should be on the process of success. What are the things that we control? What are the things that we're going to do right now? What action are we going to take? And then the outcomes will take care of themselves. They'll be a natural byproduct of a good process. Yeah. When you talk about confidence, you hear about it a lot. And I think I have a fairly simple definition of how you become confident. And that is through demonstrated ability. If you want to be confident in your ability to do something, then you just have to demonstrate many, many times that you can do it. And in our case, it's in training. Sometimes it's in meets, but you know what I mean? But if you want to be confident, you have to do something. Nobody can make you feel confident if you haven't done the work and you haven't done the preparation and you haven't seen it in practice. You're not going to be confident. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're trying to, swim 200 meters in a certain way, you have to swim it that way in practice. And if you've done those things in practice, Michael and I would have a little system. And it would be, we would have a goal of, let's say, swimming the last 100 of a 200 butterfly in 58 seconds. And we want to do it with 19 and 20 strokes on the first 50 and the second 50 of the last 100. And we would do that in practice. And if he did it in practice, we'd be like, that's exactly what we need to finish your 200 in. Now, all we have to do between now and the next Olympics is do that 100 times. We would it would be like, that's how you build confidence. If you've done that 100 times, you could definitely stand up and do it one time, right?
So repetition.
And you could do it one time under pressure. So that's how you get confident. You don't get confident because somebody talks to you and says, oh, you're such a good person, and I think you're just going to do well. Although that helps, right? It's not going to hurt you. But you have to have something that makes sense, and you have to believe it. And to believe it, you have to have done something that makes you confident. Allison Schmidt, another great swimmer that we had, she had a tremendous breakthrough. I started working with her when she was 14 in 2006, I guess. And then in 2012, she won the individual gold medal in the 200 meters, a couple relay gold medals in London. And people are like, well, she made a huge amount of progress in that last couple years. And they're like, well, what was the difference? And I said, well, the main difference was she used to could not do any pull-ups. And then this year she did 3 sets of 8 with a 20-pound weight belt on. That's a difference. You get strong.
Not easy.
She's already a talented swimmer. Now she's a strong and talented swimmer. So you can point back to things like that and you say, you start doing stuff like that, and I could go 10 things in practice that she could do that I don't think anybody in the world could do at that time. And that's how you separate yourself. But that's how you're confident. You do that, then you can walk into your arena, whatever that is, and know that you have the skills and the preparation to do your best.
So definitely preparation is one of the keys to confidence. What about self-talk, Bob?
That's important. That is definitely important. How you talk about what you're doing and how do you talk to yourself is absolutely critical. And I think that goes back to number one, positive attitude, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're going to do the best we can in this situation today, right now. And we're going to believe that we can do it because we've proven we can do it in practice. And we're going to work together on it. And, you know, the best way to be at the major competition, and here's another coaching thing, is that when they get to that competition, the only thing that I do to them is give them a high five and say, oh, well, you're right. You need to be here in 20 minutes and let's go. Have fun. That's it. I don't talk about anything because I can only mess them up at that point, right? They're prepared. And if they have the positive attitude and they're prepared, they're going to do well. And my job is to keep everything loose. And like Allison Schmidt, if Allison is laughing and high-fiving me before she goes to swim, she's going to be really good. If she's serious, it's not going to be good. So I think those are things that you kind of start to figure out as well, right? Self-talk, how you talk to your athletes, how they interact with their teammates, all of these things are kind of the final touches of a performance.
Bob, getting onto that, how important is it for an athlete to have a pre-race, a pre-match, pre-competition routine? I'm talking about that let's call it that hour before competing. How important is it for an athlete to have a certain routine? Because I've worked with athletes who love to be left alone. I've worked with athletes who love to listen to music, athletes who love to be around people. How important is it for that athlete to find that perfect preparation?
Absolutely critical. And I'll speak to Michael because he's the gold standard in this, but I gave Michael a warm-up when he was 12 years old that he basically did for every race at every competition his entire career.
Wow.
Last race in Rio, 12-year-old race. Now, obviously, it grew and it got tweaked a little bit, but the framework of it is exactly the same. He would get in, you know, we would arrive at the venue 2 hours before. He'd have 30 minutes to kind of do a stretching program, get himself mentally ready. 1.5 hours before his first event, he would be in the water and he would do the main part of his warm-up, and that would be a very specific thing. Then he would get out after about 40 minutes, and he would have a little bit of time to, you know, get his thoughts together, put on his racing suit. Then 30 minutes before the race, he would get back in and swim for about 10 minutes, or just a little light thing, but still something we would have done over and over and over. And then he would get up and go to the ready room. So he literally did that warm-up every race. There was no question when we went to a pool what was going to happen. If I was there, if I wasn't there, didn't matter. 2 hours before, he's going to start stretching. He's going to start doing his thing an hour and a half. He knows what that's going to be. Every now and then, if he needed an adjustment with his stroke or something, I'd give it to him, but very basic kind of thing. Wouldn't time anything. We don't like to put any time swims in too much to the warm-ups. And then he would just go and swim. But when you have that, you are rock solid about what your day is going to be like, right? And when you're swimming as many events as Michael is, you just had to be that way. You just couldn't have too many decisions on your plate. And each athlete's different. Allison has a very different warm-up. The timing is the same, but I actually will time things with her in the warm-up because I don't think she warms up hard enough by herself. Michael does. So I have to kind of get her to an effort level, right? But every one of my athletes at the top level has a very strict time schedule of what they're going to do. And not only does this allow you to be organized and efficient in your time, I think it takes away a lot of stress. And it's just a ritual, right? You get yourself in, you learn how to get yourself into the mind frame as you start to move from one step to the next. You're gradually moving towards the big moment, but you're doing it in a way that you've done many, many times, and you can make little decisions or adjustments if you need to based on the amount of times you've done it, right? So it's not like it just stays the same the whole time, and if you don't feel like you need to do 2 more 25s hard, you can't, or maybe you need to feel like you want to do a little bit less because you're a little tired, but you have a large framework of data to make those decisions on, and they're easy to make.
It's always something that's fascinated me, Bob, is watching the preparation of the top athletes. I mean, I've watched Roger Federer's, I've watched Nick Matthew, who was number one in the world in squash. I've watched Alison Felix, and I've watched them numerous times where I could almost commentate. Okay, here's what's coming next. Here's what's coming next. And
Yeah,
just like you said there, Michael had his routine obviously since the age of 12. You tweaked it a little bit, but it stayed the same because obviously routines help us with nerves, help us with anxiety. And it's always
yeah,
something I find so important in implementing in junior athletes, especially, is find that pre-match, pre-race routine, just like you mentioned.
absolutely.
So awesome. Number 10, celebrate success. Ooh, now, personally speaking, Bob, this was a tough one for me because I'd achieved something. I was two-time national champion in the sport of duathlon and triathlon, but I would never give myself a chance to celebrate success because I'd be on to the next goal. How do you celebrate
Right.
success when you're chasing perfection?
Well, that's a good question. And my role is I hardly celebrate it at all. So probably I could do a little better. I could give myself a day, right? I'm already moving on. He hits the wall in a race, gold medal. Okay, what's the next one? I'm already thinking about it. But um, I think you want to celebrate it enough that you sort of refill your gas tank, right? A little bit. It
Yeah.
takes a lot to get there. And you've got to give yourself a chance to, enjoy the moment, feel really good about it, celebrate it really with your team. That's the best part, right? Is celebrating with your team, right? And then you've got to move on at some point, relatively in the near future. You've got to kind of survive your success and move on to the next stage, right? Unless of course, you're retiring, then you can just enjoy it as long as you'd like. But I have found that you do need to make sure that you really enjoy these times because they're very special and they're not around all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not always going to be winning gold medals. So I think you just have to figure out what that time space is for you and give yourself a chance to do it. I wish I had probably done it a little more earlier in my career because, at that point you're thinking, wow, it's just going to happen all the time. These world records are just going to keep rolling along. You're like, okay, what's the next one?
But,
They don't always keep rolling along.
but Bob, would you agree that it's a trait of a serial winner, of a serial champion, is that good is not good enough? You're always looking for that next better thing?
Oh, there's no question. And I can promise you that every race that Michael ever swam, even his last race, maybe not the relay that he swam because he did pretty well in that, but his last individual race, 200 IM, he got out. I said, if I'd just been a little faster on breaststroke, I'd have broken the world record. That's right. You know what I mean? We were both had like two things like, oh man, I wish you just pushed it a little bit more the second 50 and then your breaststroke would have set up. You could have been there. So we're always looking at the next thing. There is no race that I don't think Michael's ever swum, even the big ones, even the 100th of a second fly race is like, he came back and I said, well, if you'd been out 2/10 faster, we wouldn't have to worry about that.
That's coming from a 23-time gold medalist. Tell me, Bob, was Michael very self-critical?
Oh, absolutely. And actually, as we got through, once Michael and I have been together for a decade or so, I wouldn't even have to coach. He'd come out and tell me everything is wrong with the race. And maybe I'd say something that he had missed, or we would always be on the same page. He would come out and I'd be like, "Oh, the third turn." He's like, "Yeah, I know. I chopped that wall. I didn't hit it on a full stroke." So he was very in tune to what it took to be good. And at that point, when you're at the very high level, you're only making a couple mistakes, right? So they're pretty glaring. You're not making a mistake every lap. You're making one a race, maybe one major one. So if he did something, he would know that what he could do to be better.
Awesome. Bob, what was your most memorable moment as a coach? I mean, you've obviously achieved so much. You still are coaching, but
Yeah.
what's your most memorable moment as a coach?
Wow. There are so many, right? Do you know, honestly, I think you'd be surprised that my most memorable coaching moment had nothing to do with Michael.
Okay.
I coached the University of Michigan for 4 years, 2004 to 2008. And when I took over the team, the college team there had been kind of down a little bit. We had some very talented individuals, but the team as a whole hadn't been as successful as perhaps they wanted to be in the past. And after 2 years, we weren't getting any better. I had put all this stuff into place, and we were working hard, and we're doing this, and we had tried to do some stuff. And I felt like we were struggling to the point where I was like, well, are we ever going to get it going? And after 2 years, all of my Olympic swimmers, I had some very good swimmers, they graduated, and we were left with a team that everybody thought would be fourth or fifth place in our conference, which is unheard of for Michigan. And I was starting to think of, well, maybe this college swimming is not going to work for me. Well, anyway, we just decided to regroup and kind of refresh everything that third year. And we went to the conference meet that year, and we're on fire. It was crazy. It was, and I absolutely remember after the first session, the guys coming back, and we had lunch, and it was like they were different people. It was like a light bulb came on. I was like, we can do this. And we fought our way through this meet that we should have been fifth at, and we got to the very last event, and we had a chance to win, and we lost by 4 points. And it was heartbreaking, right? Because it didn't have anything to do with us. It was like some other teams had to do some things, but they didn't do it. And I remember having those guys around me, and we were all just, at one point, kind of crushed that we didn't win. But I could look in their eyes, and I said, I promise you, if you stay with me next year, it's going to be a different feeling at the end of this meet. And 1 year later in Michigan, we won by the biggest point total ever. I think we won by 300 points.
Wow.
So it was just, I will always remember that as all this stuff that we sort of struggled to try to put into place, and everything we just talked about in this book happened in that process. And it got really tough to the point where it seemed like it was never going to happen. And right before I quit, it happened.
There you go. The breakthrough.
I was just about to say, wow, I don't think this is going to happen. And it happened right there. So it was certainly the most meaningful for me in terms of, let's be honest, with Michael Phelps, a lot of stuff comes easy, at least for a coach. I can give him hard stuff to do. And if he does it, he swims really fast. But these were guys that had to work for everything that they earned, right? They earned everything they got. And to me, that was as satisfying as any gold medal the other people won.
Awesome. I love it. Talking about teams, Bob, what would be your advice to teams that are trying to improve their team culture? How do you improve a team's culture? Especially, this is an interesting thing as well, is that especially in sports like tennis, golf, swimming, where you've maybe been brought up in a way of being individual because it's you against the rest, but then all of a sudden you're in a team environment. How's it possible to create a great team environment, team culture?
Well, I think you have to know that they have a saying in the United States, the name on the front of the jersey is more important than the name on the back, right?
Yep.
So you're swimming for Team USA. That's way more important than what your name is, So there's something bigger. But I think it gets back to your attitude and the things that you value, right? When I talk about my teams, we talk about the things that we value, and that develops our culture. And for my guys, now at Arizona State University, we have 5 words that we go over in the first team meeting every year, and we go over them all the time. 1 is honesty. Number 2 is accountability. Number 3 is competitiveness. Number 4 is resiliency. And number 5 is respect. Those are the things we value. And we can kind of go into specifics on all those and what those mean. But that's the core of what we're about. And if you don't believe in those, you're not going to be part of what we're doing. So I just think that's where we approach it. And not everybody is perfect on those all the time. And we are constantly trying to, get people up to speed and bring them in. But I think once you get the critical mass of people on your team who believe in those things, the outliers are easier to bring in, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's where we start. You start on the things that you value.
Well, definitely, Bob. I'm going to get you on a future podcast if you're willing to get on to talk about those 5 values, because
I would absolutely love to do that.
Awesome. This has been amazing. So I'm going to be respectful of your time, Bob. This has been amazing. I'm going to finish with one last question. In your opinion, what does it take to be champion-minded?
Focus on the process.
I like that. Focus on the process. What's happening right now.
Exactly. Be present.
Important to have a vision, but focus on right now. Be present. I love that. Awesome. Bob, it's been an absolute pleasure. Guys out there, thank you for listening to the podcast. And if you haven't read Bob's book, The Golden Rules, I highly, highly recommend it. It was one of my top books for 2018. I use a lot of Bob's principles in my coaching and my consulting, so amazing book. Bob, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you for your time.
Allistair, it's been a real pleasure. Anytime. Love to come back.
Awesome stuff, Bob. Have a super day.
You too. Thank you.
Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one with the man himself, Bob Bowman. Just incredible insights and a coach with some amazing experience. Remember that this podcast is available on iTunes and on YouTube. Also, to connect, follow me on social media, on Twitter at Allistair McCall, Instagram, Be Champion Minded, and on Facebook, Allistair McCall page. So guys, remember, you were made for greatness. Now go do the work. Until next time, stay champion minded, my friends.